Good evening and welcome to Season AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. Tonight, I want you to keep an eye on the figure that's above my head, directly above my head. It is the U.S. national debt profile. That's the debt profile, 34 trillion and counting, and it's rising all the time. Now, what I want you to be aware of is that this is something that is totally, you know, unacceptable. That the U.S. owing 34 trillion and the World Bank treats the US with kid gloves because US created the World Bank and IMF. They created them. They created the IMF and World Bank. So they'll just tell them, all you have to do is just make sure you get your pay the debt down to reduce it. That's all they're saying. Year on, they've been saying the same thing. You'll hear a person actually asked that, and they haven't. It's just going up. They're not facing any financial stringent sanctions or heavy fines to make sure that they comply. None of that. But when it comes to African countries, if you miss your payment of the people, they put heavy fines on you and your debt increases, and it's a vicious cycle. We need to stop this. You will watch what has been happening in Kenya. And of course, you will hear the IMF say, we condole with the people, we are sorry, and everything else. We may their souls rest in peace, and those who lost their lives or who are unalived and all of that stuff. It's all empty platitudes. Empty platitudes. What you need to see is what is happening.
You're seeing the U.S. debt numbers rise all the time, and nothing is being done to sanction them. If it was an African country, they would sanction us. Injustice.
2020 in the pandemic. So I'm just wondering if you can describe how the IMF is viewing these signals. Are we at a turning point here? Is there a risk of waiting too long, which would be bad for developing economies? Thanks.
Great, thanks, David. While we're on the U.S., any other questions on the U.S.?
On the debt?
Sorry, U.S. and U.S.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Igor Nemushkin with RIA News Agency. So on debt issue, the IMF has recently stated that the United States government should urgently approach its debt problem and somehow manage to decrease it. But if we look at the graph, we see that the US debt has been growing for decades, and the United States government has been doing almost nothing to decrease it. So maybe it has, but we haven't seen any decrease. So I have a question. What are the real repercussions from the IMF standpoint if this trend continues, and why the IMF decided to be vocal right now if we have seen these decades of growing US debt? Thank you.
The IMF and World Bank treated with kid gloves, whereas African countries are not even
Thank you, Igor. And I think we have Mao Ling.
Conditions making the lives of people unbearable. Double standard.
Thank you. Mao Ling Xiong with Xinhua News Agency. I also want to ask about U.S. debt because the U.S. Federal Reserve seems to be expected to cut rates later than previously expected. I wonder how does that impact U.S. National deficit and debt, and also going forward, as the Fed is expected to cut rates, would interest still be a big burden for U.S. debt? Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone online want to come in on the U.S.? Okay, let me take these questions on the U.S. Starting with inflation and monetary policy. And just a reminder, I think many of you were there, but last week we concluded our staff level discussions with the U.S. authorities for the 2024 Article 4. The managing director and my colleagues from the Western Hemisphere Department had a press briefing to discuss the situation in the U.S. Maybe just in terms of the U.S. economy, it's good to remind that the performance of the U.S. economy has been remarkably strong. Both activity and employment have exceeded expectations, and the disinflation process is underway. Regarding inflation in particular and monetary policy, as we stated last week, we do support the Fed's data-dependent and cautious approach to monetary policy. We also do expect that the Fed will be in a position to reduce rates later this year, and that assessment continues to hold. In terms of the questions on debt, we have been clear, I think last week in our discussion around the 2024 Article 4, that action is needed by the United States to reduce its high fiscal deficit and to put debt on a downward trajectory. I should say that we have been highlighting these concerns for quite some time. It has been a recommendation that we've had in past Article 4s as well. Why is it important to do this? What we can say is that in 2021 and 2022, the US did pass significant fiscal legislation, and that legislation is expected to have a lasting positive impact on reshaping the US economy.
You can see the sheer double
At the same time, now the fiscal deficit is too high, and it is the time now, especially that the economy is strong, to take action to put debt to GDP on a decisive downward path. And that will require a broad set of fiscal measures, and we will, of course, have a full detailing of those measures in the Article 4 report that will be published in the coming weeks. And with respect to the question on interest, the federal government in the US has a line called net interest payments. Those in FY 2023, net interest payments of the federal government were 2.4% of GDP. In the current FY, they are expected to increase to 3.2% of GDP. And this is largely due to higher interest rates. Looking even further ahead, our estimate is that net interest payments are expected to remain elevated even in the medium term, and that is on the basis of high primary fiscal deficits and the resulting public debt. And it's for this reason as well that we are calling for action to be taken to reduce the US deficit and debt at this time. All right. Eric?
Yes. Moving to another topic, I wanted to ask you about Kenya. We've seen this morning the news that President Ruto has dismissed most of his cabinet. We've certainly seen the reaction in the streets in Kenya to the tax increases that the Kenyan government was attempting to implement. Wanted to ask several questions on Kenya about whether the IMF is in talks to extend Kenya's program, which is due to end in April 2025. Any plans to change the program in light of the tax plan that has been suspended, and when, if you have a date yet for the board to discuss the review of the Kenya program, which I understand was delayed.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Any other questions on Kenya in the room? And I know I have some questions online on Kenya. I think Julian and Rodrigo, I understand you have questions on Kenya.
Sure thing. Can I go first?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just to add to what Eric has already floated by way of questions has the government of Kenya expressly reached out to the IMF in terms of potentially recalibrating the program, whether by extension or some of the benchmark requirements in light of the developments which saw the suspension of the now infamous Finance Bill of 2024? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rodrigo, did you have a question also on Kenya?
Thank you. The colleagues have asked for me. I do have a question on Pakistan. I don't know if you want it now or later.
I'll come back to you on Pakistan.
Thank you.
And I see a question has come in online on Kenya, which I'll read out loud. The question is from Rama Nyang of CGTN. The question is, has there been any effort by the Kenyan government to get in touch with the IMF to restructure some of the targets in the loan program? Would the fund also be willing to move some of the loan payments forward as part of the efforts to create some fiscal headroom? Okay, so turning to Kenya, let me start by expressing our deepest sympathy to the people affected by the tragic events in Kenya. Our hearts go out to those who have lost their lives, lost loved ones, or suffered injuries. With respect to Kenya's broader situation, I think it's important to say that the situation in Kenya reflects broader challenges facing many of our low-income members. Many of these countries are experiencing a funding squeeze, including on account of tighter global financial conditions and reduced availability of concessional financing. So policymakers in these countries, including in Kenya, face a complex balancing act. They have pressing spending needs in priority areas, such as social programs, health, and education. They're managing rising public debt and debt service, and they also have the challenge of boosting domestic revenue. For Kenya specifically, the goal of our IMF-supported program is to help establish sound macroeconomic fundamentals. And these are crucial for fostering sustainable and inclusive growth in the country, crucial for generating jobs for the Kenyan people, including Kenya's young population. We are currently working with the authorities to ensure that these objectives can be met. And we recognize that there's a careful balance between providing public services and securing adequate financing. Our program also includes initiatives to improve governance and transparency and to ensure responsible use of public funds, to safeguard social programs and social spending, particularly to protect the most vulnerable members of society. It's also important that these policies that are under discussion go through a process of broad consultation so they can gain broad public support. We remain committed to supporting Kenya in its effort to achieve inclusive growth. At every program review, we do take the opportunity to assess developments and make adjustments considering the evolving circumstances. And that's exactly what we're doing in our active and constructive discussion with the Kenyan authorities. And we're confident that we will be able to find a balanced path forward with Kenya. Okay, Kemi, over.
Notice how the US national debt profile, the highest in the entire world, is treated with kids' gloves. Oh, we advise them to do this. But when it comes to Africa, African nations, that has been imposed. This is not the nations in Africa is not by design of our ancestors. This is an imposition by the colonials. And yet, when those loans are taken, we are forced to comply with it through tough conditions that makes the lives of Africans unbearable on the African continent. It's time we break free from this tortuous bodies created, designed to ensure that Africa remains colonized. How is it that Africa, that has all the resources, do not have financial structures that manages and decides who to trade with freely and independently, without any question from anybody, without anybody coming and say, oh, you have to comply with my own financial structures on the African continent? This is pure exploitation. Watch and listen to how they talk about the debt of Kenya and how they're saying they're going to get the people to actually understand and support it, even though it's oppressing them in their own land. I keep telling you, as an African, you're a sovereign, you have authority, and you have power. It's time to start using it. We need to translate. We are translating the constitution into local languages. We're looking for people to assist us. So please subscribe to Citizen AY on YouTube and subscribe to us on TikTok. All of the funds will help us to be able to focus on doing more research and bringing it to you. And at the same time, we want to be able to get more funding and to please donate to us to help to begin to make sure that every in all 55 African countries, all of the constitutions are translated into local languages. It is through that translation that the people can now able to now pick out and identify the things that are not working and make a conscious decision to change the constitution. Now that is real power right there that we're putting in the hands of the people. That's why I keep telling you, you are sovereign, you have authority, and you have power. All of this has been denied you because the constitution has been written in 3 key languages of the colonials: in English, in French, and Portuguese, and it's been imposed on us till today. Kenya was only changed; they only changed the constitution in 2010, and even that change is still under the control of the colonials because they're trying to ensure that the people have leasehold rather than freehold. That means that people do not own anything, and that is not acceptable. We need to speak up as Africans, and that's why we're encouraging you. We're urging you to support us. Subscribe to Citizen AY on YouTube. Subscribe to us on TikTok. Gift our platform, help us grow. The more we do that, the more we can share really key information that will be beneficial to the entire African continent, and indeed our Caribbean brothers and sisters, our US and Africans and Brazilian Africans, and every African on the planet. It is time we do this. We must work together. We're calling for Africans to completely boycott IMF, World Bank, because they are oppressing us on our land, and they're turning the other eye. As you see the debt profile of the US, 34 trillion. This is sickening injustice, something we must no longer tolerate. We need to support Ibrahim Traore, Assimi Goïta, and General Chani. It's Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta of Mali, General Chani of Niger. They are standing for Africans, and we need to ensure we expand the Alliance of Sahel States because Africa must be free. They're creating system of monetary structures, security structures, economic structures, all of that caters for and put African concerns and African people first and foremost on the African continent, and that's how it should be. Watch this video. What are your thoughts on what you've seen after you've watched it? Let's have your comments. Please don't forget to subscribe to Citizen on TikTok. Help us grow the platform, and we welcome gifts. And please share the videos, all our videos. Share it to help us get more people on board, and we can really do this. We are doing it, and we are achieving it. We need more support to reach more people and be able to translate all those constitutions into local languages. You can do that as well. If you know the constitution in local language in English, translate it. Don't wait. This is a task for all of us. Please, let's have your thoughts and comments. You're of course watching Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth about later on. Thank you. Bye for now.